Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. My guest is one of Broadway's newest stars. He made his Broadway debut in Jagged Little Pill. He went on to play Christian in the national tour of Moulin Rouge, and now he is back on Broadway as one of the stars of the new musical, The Notebook. Please welcome John Cardoza. You are back on Broadway.
Yeah.
How exciting is that?
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's amazing to be back on Broadway, but to be on Broadway in a show that I am so passionate about and a role that I'm so passionate about is like beyond my wildest dreams. Like this has been the most wonderful way to come back and really sink myself into something that I love.
Yeah, this is such an iconic book and an iconic film. How well did you know The Notebook?
You know, I was pretty young when the movie came out, and so I sort of grew up with it. I hadn't read the novel until recently. But the movie was something that I didn't understand really when I first saw it because I was so young. And as I watched it again, you know, a few years later, and then a few years later, each time you sort of understand it on a deeper level because you're watching a life play out in front of you, and so you understand it differently as you live your own life. And so I think that's a trademark of like really amazing art, is art that sort of like grows with you. And then when I was cast in the show, I tried to distance myself from the film because of the performances, and but I did read the novel twice through, and I was just, you know, I understand why it's such a hit. At its core, it's these two people living very normal, unextraordinary lives, and the only reason that it becomes extraordinary is because they've decided that it is. And it sort of reminds us that all lives can be extraordinary if we feel them on that deepest level. And I just love that message. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, we should tell our audience that we are literally sitting downstairs in the lounge at the Show and Tell Theater on a double show day. And we're getting ready to do a matinee.
I am.
You've been up early today, right?
I have been up early today, but you know what? I'm happy to be here always. I will take any chance I can to talk about this show. I'm very passionate about it.
Well, audiences have already fallen in love with this show.
Yeah.
What's it been like just feeling the audience's reaction to this show and to your performances?
Oh my God, it's unbelievable because I mean you get so close to a piece when you're working on it like this, and when you feel so much passion for it, it's scary to release to the world because you hope that it's received in the same way. And you know, for some people it will be, and for some people it won't be, and that's okay. But to reach the end of the show and to receive from the audience, you know, there's this cathartic release, I think, at the end where you know that you've just watched a life play out in front of you, and we're all just here to celebrate the miracle that is being alive at the same time as someone else that just meshes so well with who you are. Like, should we all be so lucky?
Yeah.
And so to see audiences responding to that the way that they have been has been really reaffirming, and it gets me excited to do the show every night. It's a show that I can do a million times, and there's always something new to find in it, and I'm really lucky to be here.
Well, what I love about the musical is there are 3 different versions
Yes.
of Allie and Noah.
Yep.
There's the older, the middle, and the younger.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, you are sensational.
Thank you so much. I really
as
appreciate
younger
that.
Noah.
Thank you.
You live inside this role so beautifully.
Thank you.
What's it like playing him? What do you love the most about him?
Oh my gosh, I love so much about him,
Yeah.
and I found a lot of intersection of self and character in this one. One of my favorite things about him, arguably my favorite thing about him, is that he's somebody who experiences a lot of tragedy very early in his life, and I think that it's easy to sort of blanket his demeanor as somebody who is sad. He's a sad character, but I don't think that he is at all. I think that he has a very hard-won, there's a hard-won piece that he's made with life because he's seen the good and the ugly, and on the outside looking in, if you haven't experienced that kind of tragedy, it's hard to imagine carrying on, but he does. He finds joy in making music with his friends on the dock and reading poetry. He meets this girl that he sees so much potential in building a life with. He sees this house and he says, I'm going to paint the shutters blue. I'm going to bring color back to this house and give it a second chance and give it beautiful views to look at. And I'm going to fill it with love and with family. And I think his resilience is really amazing. And not unlike him, I lost my mother a few years ago, and getting to examine my own experience of grief through his lens has educated me on how to move forward in my own life as I process my own, grief. And that has been the greatest gift of this whole process for me.
Isn't that great that art does that?
Yeah.
And being creative, that you can work through something personal, but also put it into your craft.
Absolutely. And I get to carry her on stage with me every night, and that is like remarkable to me.
Well, like I said, you were sensational to watch in this show and the journey you take.
Thank you so much.
So when you were in rehearsal, did you all watch each other? Like, I'm the younger version, you're the middle version. He became a little bit of you, and then, you know, Dorian became a little bit of both of you.
I mean, a little bit. It's, you spend so much time together that it's just kind of is something that happens naturally. And we sort of started the process by discovering like a bit of like a similar language of movement, so that they're like certain gestures that we can return to, that you'll find the through line. But in the same way that I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, Noah's not going to be the same person that he was 10 years ago. So the differences that occur from our own each individual lived experiences kind of make sense and carry the character to the end of his life. And so it just kind of works. It just kind of flows that way. And I always describe it as, and this is like my famous soundbite, but you know what, I'm going to say it anyways, because I think it's the best way to explain it, is when you have your hand on a cold object and you leave it there, eventually you reach like that temperature, like equilibrium, and it kind of feels like we all have our hands on the same object and we're just reaching the same temperature, and so that temperament follows us all the way through the show. And I think that is that's sort of like the secret sauce, is you start to, you all have the same source material, and you embody it in a similar way. It's just, it happens that way.
That's why it's such a beautiful show. You're all in it together. It's like sitting on a cloud.
Yep.
I watched it the other night. It's like there's this hypnotic feel to this musical, which is so beautiful, getting inside everybody, you know, physically and emotionally. Let's talk about your beautiful composer, wrote the music and lyrics, Ingrid Michaelson.
Yes.
Did you know her stuff before?
Of course. I grew up listening to her music, and I mean, it was really everywhere. Her music really hit its stride when I was a kid, so you'd be hard pressed to find a song of hers that I don't recognize. But what I think is amazing about this show is that it's a really impressive expansion of her sound. She has a really unique choice of words. So when you listen to the music, you know that it's coming from the same heart, the same artist. But she has really expanded her range. It's very sweeping and theatrical, which I think is something that's new for her. And I think people are going to be really blown away with what she's written.
I mean, this is her Broadway debut as a composer.
Yes.
You know, like Sarah Bareilles had the same thing. It's like once they work on one, they're like, oh, this is a magical world to work in, the world of theater, right?
And I didn't know until I started working on this that she has a history in theater. She went to school for theater, and so it's, I think, so fitting and natural that this is like the perfect marriage of all of her talents. And I think that this is some of the best work she's done. I think that she would agree on that. She's very public about that. And so I reinforce that sentiment. I think that she's at the top of her game in this.
Yeah. You have two of the greatest directors. You have two working on this musical, which I think is perfect. You have Michael Greif and you have Shelley Williams. Mm-hmm. What makes them such wonderful and in-demand directors, and what was the whole experience like working with them?
Yeah, and you know, we were just talking about this a little bit before we hopped on camera. I think I really see it. Michael is such a master of his craft in that he really understands stage picture, stagecraft, and the way that all of the elements of a show come together to create the whole. And so he's such a technician, and he leads with his head. And I think that Shelley, having such a rich history as an actress, she's able to communicate so well with actors, and she really leads with her heart. You can tell that she's a mother when she talks to you. She's very gentle and cognizant of the demands of, you know, teching a show, putting on its feet, previews, and so the two of them just kind of complete each other as directors, and so it's been really wonderful to see how well they complement each other, and I think the product is a testament to that partnership.
And working with this company, what it's meant to you?
Oh my gosh, I mean, getting to work with people like Marianne Plunkett and Dorian Harewood, who are setting the most incredible example for us. I mean, there's something to be learned every night from their performances. You have, again, like Joy and Ryan as well, who are laying their hearts out there every night. They're unbelievable and such joys to be around, no pun intended. And then, of course, my counterpart, Jordan, who is remarkable. It's her Broadway debut. I can't wait for all of you to be blown away by her. She is such a gift. My performance does not exist without her. And one of my favorite moments of the show is actually off stage when we sort of check in at the top of every show, and we're sort of like, okay, this is where I'm at today. And I say, great, I'm going to hold that for you, and you're going to hold this for me, and we're going to go out there and we're going to play. And that's it. And so I know that when I'm out there, I have somebody that I can trust completely. And I think that is what allows us to lean into the romance so much because, I mean, she's so easy to love.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
You know, you mentioned Broadway debuts. You made your Broadway debut in Jagged Little Pill. They
Yes.
only come once. You know, they're
They
really
do.
special. What do you remember about your Broadway debut opening night?
Honestly, very little. It's such a blur, but you know what I do remember? This is like, it's so random, but it's the thing that I remember the most. I got out there for the opening number, and there's a moment in the show where we're all sort of like down towards the lip of the stage, and we're like dancing. The pulse is starting to build, and it's the first time that I get to really look at the audience, and we're sort of like staring them down. And I locked eyes with Rosie O'Donnell, and she was sitting next to Sarah McLachlan, and I was like, "What an iconic duo!" And I just thought to myself, "I made it!" Like, I was like, this is somebody who is an icon. Like when I was younger, I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, like her show was such a staple of pop culture. So to know that I was being watched not only by her, but people even in her realm, I was like, what an incredible reach this arena has of Broadway. And it like really brings so many people together from all different corners. And I was like, for some reason for me, I was like, thanks, Rosie, you really affirmed that moment for me.
Now, you also got to play Christian in the national tour with our dear friend, Courtney Reed, who I was with Monday night. She adores you.
I love her so much. She truly is like the best friend I never knew I needed. It's really hard not to fall in love with her. I'm so grateful that we're on 45th Street. She's right across the street. I go hang out in her dressing room between shows. She just like, I think we found each other at a time when we each really needed someone to lean on. And she has shown up for me on stage, off stage. Like, she's just the kind of friend that you dream about having. She really is.
Was there a defining moment for you growing up when you said, I think I want to be a performer and try to make a living at this?
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't know that this was something that I could do until sort of later in my, probably late in high school. I grew up in an area that was not very arts heavy, and so I did the school shows and I sang in the choir. My mom was very musical. She played the piano and was always playing music around the house. And a friend of a friend came to see a show that I was in at school, and he was going to the Boston Conservatory for Musical Composition. And he pulled me aside and he was like, he for some reason had on him the cast recording of Next to Normal. And he gave it to me and he said, listen to this. And he was like, I think that you can do this if you want. And he's like, you should come to the campus and just like walk around and see if it's your vibe. And I just remember music everywhere, from every window, every hallway, every alley. And I was like, I really want to be a part of this. And I really set my sights on it then. And I felt like I had a lot of catch up to play because there are a lot of people who are steeped in this from childhood. And so once I was in an environment where I could learn so much, it was the paramount importance to me to be a sponge and just learn from everyone, students, teachers, and I just let the chips fall where they may. But I feel like this is what I'm on this earth to do, and it just kind of found me that way.
I'm going to mention one word, banjo.
Banjo is my dog. Oh my gosh, he's the best. Oh my gosh, I love him so much, and he really saw me through so many chapters of my life. I got him before I knew that the pandemic was really going to be a thing in January of 2020. I thought, oh my gosh, I've got it. Like I have a routine schedule, I have a steady income, now is the time. And then of course the world stopped and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But it ended up being the greatest decision I've ever made. He provided a lot of comfort to me during a very difficult time. You know, on top of the pandemic, that was around the time that we lost my mother. And so not only to me, but to my family, he has been just this pillar of joy and comfort and support. And watching him bond with my dad has been my favorite part of owning a dog.
So my final question is, I know you have to get ready for your matinee. What's the last thing you do before you hit the stage for a performance of The Notebook?
I take a deep breath. And there's one of my favorite quotes from the book. I sort of like let it sink into my brain and I try to feel every single word of it. And that is, he said, the quote is, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but he says, "The evening passed, staying warm, nice. Noah listened to the crickets and the rustling leaves, thinking that the sounds of nature evoked more feeling and were more real than things like planes and cars, because natural things gave back more than they took, and they returned him to the way that man was meant to be." And that to me is sort of like, that is the lifeblood of who Noah is. And Nevin, our sound designer, did this wonderful thing of including all these nature sounds on stage, and anytime that I feel overwhelmed or lost in the story, I just clue into those sounds and it brings me right back to stillness. And so I'm really grateful for that.
Well, like I said, you are a joy to watch on stage. I wish you could step out of yourself and watch
you
what
so
you
much.
give an audience and everything else.
Thank you.
You were
That means a
sensational.
lot.
Thank you for doing this
Appreciate it.
today.
Thank you for
on the
having
Double
me.
Show Day.
Yes, of course, anytime. Always happy to see you.
Always a pleasure, John.
Thank you so much.